Hi, thanks for clicking on my video. Today we're going to be talking about 12 seasonal color analysis. It is a lot, so grab a drink of choice.
Seasonal color analysis is not a new concept. In fact, our modern understanding of harmonious colors comes from the 19th century Impressionist painters' understandings of the seasons. In order to accurately depict each season, they needed to understand the colors that are reflective of each one. This means there is a certain set or palette of colors which exists during a certain period of time in the natural world and which appears harmonious to us because of the way the light is reflected on the natural world. Since we humans are also part of the natural world, it only makes sense to apply these set of colors on ourselves as well. But it was not until the 1980s that the application of the 4 seasons to fashion color choices gained mainstream popularity, largely due to Carol Jackson's successful book Color Me Beautiful. Her analysis focuses on 2 of the 3 dimensions of color. In Jackson's book, which seasonal type you are depends therefore on 2 basic variables: the undertone of your skin, hair, and eyes, either warm or cool, and how light or dark your overall coloring, and specifically your hair is. The seasons represent the 4 possible variations of these 2 variables, either spring, summer, autumn, or winter. Some people fall without a doubt into one of these 4 categories, but the truth is that most people don't fall neatly into one of these 4 original seasons. The model was therefore refined and developed into a more accurate 12 seasons color analysis. The reason the basic analysis does not work for everyone is that there's one fundamental aspect missing from it. This will be the 3rd color dimension of chroma or saturation. Chroma distinguishes strong saturated colors from weak grayish ones. Adding chroma to the 4 seasons color analysis creates the more accurate 12 seasons color theory. The 3 aspects of color then results in 6 instead of 4 characteristics, which are warm or cool, light or dark, and bright, clear, muted, or soft.
So the 12 seasonal color analysis divides each season into 3. So for example, winter will be a true winter, bright winter, or dark winter.
Here is a chart of the 12 seasons so you can identify the characteristics that define each season. On the left, we will have the primary characteristic, and on the right, the secondary characteristic that will equal your color season. Now that we know what we are looking for, we can determine your color season. First, we will identify your dominant characteristic and then your secondary characteristic. The dominant characteristic is the aspect of your natural coloring that dominates your overall appearance. So ask yourself, which aspect of your coloring strikes you first when you look in the mirror? Remember that your dominant characteristic can sit on any of the 3 color dimensions and is one of the 6 color characteristics. Let's go through these characteristics briefly. The first one will be hue, warm versus cool undertones. If your dominant characteristic sits on the hue scale, it will be either warm or cool. If you cannot clearly identify with either of these 2 characteristics, hue will be your secondary characteristic. Your dominant characteristic is warm if the first thing that strikes you about your appearance is the obvious warmth radiating from your features and the complete absence of coolness. Your skin has an obvious yellow, golden, earthy, or peachy undertone. The overall contrast level of your features is medium. No feature is extremely light or extremely dark compared to the rest. Your eyes would be a light to medium brown, olive green, dark hazel, light hazel, warm blue, often with a yellowish rim around the pupil. Medium to dark brown for darker ethnicities, but with obvious warm undertones. Here you can see in the examples that these ladies radiate warmth. The first thing that you notice is the warmth of their undertone. Your hair will neither be dark or light. It has a medium intensity, light to medium golden blonde brown or strawberry blonde through rich and warm red copper to deep auburn. Darker ethnicities may have deep golden brown or even brown black hair with obvious warm undertones. Something that can help you decide is that silver will make you look pale and pasty, but gold makes you shine. Or dominant characteristic is cool if the first thing that strikes you about your coloring is the total absence of warmth and the distinctive coolness coming from your features. Your skin has obvious grayish blue, pink, or red undertones. The overall contrast level of your features is medium to high. You may have very dark hair in contrast to a lighter skin tone. Your hair will be ash blonde to brown, chestnut brown with no reddish highlights, silver ash blonde, gray silver mix. Darker ethnicities may have dark brown, brown hair, or black hair. Your eyes will be blue, gray, hazel, softened blue, violet, soft dark brown, charcoal gray, or black. The main aspect will be the obvious coolness coming from your appearance combined with a higher contrast between hair and skin. Also, something that will help you determine this is that gold makes you look yellowish and sickly, but silver makes you shine. If your dominant characteristic sits on the value scale, it will either be light or dark. If you cannot clearly identify with one of these two characteristics, value will be your tertiary characteristic. Your dominant characteristic is light if the first thing that strikes you about your appearance is the absence of depth in your features. Your skin, eyes, and hair are light for your ethnicity. You can also be a light season if you're not Caucasian. It's difficult to find examples, but if you have very light features for your ethnicity, don't rule out the light seasons. The contrast between your skin, hair, and eye colors is low. It may be medium for darker ethnicities, but in general, all your features are rather light. Your eyes will be light to medium blue or green and light hazel or light brown. You are not light if you have brown eyes and are Caucasian. Your hair will be very light, light to medium ash or golden blonde, or soft light auburn, or light to medium brown for darker ethnicities. Again, the main aspect will be the lightness of your features and your coloring. Factor that can help you figure this out is that very dark colors age you, but light, colorful tones make your appearance pop. Your dominant characteristic is dark if the first thing that strikes you about your appearance is the depth of your hair and eyes. This characteristic is one of the more confusing ones. It can either mean that your features are dark for your ethnicity or that there is a certain depth to them that requires darker colors to bring them out. Consequently, this does not mean that dark is the dominant characteristic of all dark-skinned people. The point is that the coloring is darker in relation to your ethnicity and in combination with a high contrast. The contrast between your skin, hair, and eye colors is medium to high. Your dark hair and eyes stand in contrast to a lighter skin tone. Your eyes will be black, black-brown, red-brown, brown, dark green, or dark hazel. If you have an eye color different from the ones that I stated, you are not dark. Your hair will be very dark, black brown, black chestnut brown, medium brown, dark auburn. Something that can help you define this is that very dark colors make your eyes and hair pop, and you can wear them comfortably without being overwhelmed. And light, colorful colors, on the other hand, make you look drained and washed out. Let's move on to chroma. Chroma will be muted versus bright. So the question here is whether your coloring is highly saturated and contrasted, so bright, or very grayed out and blended, muted. If you cannot clearly identify with one of these two characteristics, chroma will be your tertiary color dimension. Your dominant characteristic is muted if the first thing that strikes you about your appearance is how grayed out it is. You have a high content of gray pigments in your coloring. Instead of contrasting, your features are all very similar and blend together. You can at first appear to be light, but you have a richer look. The overall contrast level of your features is low to medium. Skin, hair, and eyes have a similarly low intensity. Features blend rather than contrast. Your eyes blend in with your skin and your hair. They're either hazel, brown, gray-green, or gray-blue. Your hair is neither very light nor very dark, usually ashy, golden or ash blonde through to dark brown, strawberry blonde through to soft auburn, medium to dark ash brown, light gray. Again, you will notice this by the lack of contrast in your features resulted in a blended appearance and the obvious grayness of your coloring. Something that can help you figure this out is that saturated colors instantly draw attention away from you and onto themselves, but muted colors give you a sophisticated elegance. If muted colors make you look bland and washed out, this is not your dominant characteristic. Your dominant characteristic is bright if the first thing that strikes you about your appearance is the clearness and saturation of your features. There is no grayness in your coloring and your features don't blend but contrast. They clearly stand out against each other. The overall contrast level of your features is high to very high. Your eyes may stand out against your skin and hair. Your eyes will either be clear blue, turquoise, blue or green, bright green, emerald, or sparkly amber, topaz, brown, dark brown, and black. The whites of your eyes will be very clearly defined. Your hair will be black, black brown, medium to dark brown, bright golden blonde or red hair, a very golden white blonde. A factor that can help you figure this out is that you can comfortably wear high saturated colors without them stealing the show, but grayish muted colors wash you out and make you look very bland. So by now you should have found your dominant characteristic, and then you have to move on to the secondary characteristic to be able to determine your color season. You need to examine each color characteristic with even more detail because each one of the 6 characteristics is combined with another to create your overall coloring. This can be tricky because the secondary characteristic is not always as obvious as the dominant one, but don't give up. Depending on your primary color dimension, your secondary characteristic will either sit on the hue scale or on the chroma scale. So if your dominant characteristic is on the value, your light or dark, or chroma scale, your muted or bright, determine your hue next. If your dominant characteristic is on the hue, your warm or cool, move on to determining your chroma. If you do not know which is your skin undertone, I have made a video especially for this topic. You can watch that video and it'll go into depth on how to figure out your undertone, and I give you a professional image consultant technique in that video that you can use and do it at home. So this was a lot of information. I know you can watch this video as many times as you need to be able to determine, and just have patience with yourself. Do this at your own pace. You don't need to figure out your color season right away. So now that we know how to identify our primary and secondary characteristic, we're going to put them all together. We're going to go back to the chart that I showed you previously, and we're going to determine which of the 12 color seasons you fit in. If your primary characteristic is bright and your secondary characteristic is warm, you're going to be bright spring. If your primary characteristic is warm and your secondary characteristic is bright, you're going to be true spring. If your primary characteristic is light and your secondary characteristic is warm, you're going to be light spring. If your primary characteristic is light and your secondary characteristic is cool, you're going to be light summer. If your primary characteristic is cool and your secondary characteristic is muted, you're going to be true summer. If your primary characteristic is muted and your secondary characteristic is cool, you're going to be soft summer. If your primary characteristic is muted and your secondary characteristic is warm, you're going to be soft autumn. If your primary characteristic is warm and your second characteristic is muted, you're going to be true autumn. If your primary characteristic is dark and your secondary characteristic is warm, you're going to be a dark autumn. If your primary characteristic is dark and your secondary characteristic is cool, you're going to be a dark winter. If your primary characteristic is cool and your secondary characteristic is bright, you're going to be true winter. And if your primary characteristic is bright and your secondary characteristic is cool, you're going to be a bright winter. Okay, so if you've made it so far on this video, thank you so much.
That will be all for today. I hope this video helped you, and I hope that you were able to place yourself into one of the 12 seasons. If you like these kind of videos, you can watch my other videos on this topic. Thank you for watching so far. See you on my next video. Ciao. La 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 la.